Over the last 20 years, I have done a lot of video game music, primarily for the online virtual world Club Penguin, but also other games such as the mobile hit Adventure Capitalist. What I have not done a lot of is film or TV show projects, music that is scored to action happening on a screen. That's something that I've always wanted to get into, but haven't really had much of an opportunity to. Until 2024, when YouTuber Kian Carlisle contacted me and said, "Hey, I know your work on Club Penguin. I liked the stuff that you did for the Halloween party. I'm working on the pilot for a possible TV show called Not Normal, and I would like you to do the music score for it." He sent me the storyboards of it, the animatic, and I watched it and thought, okay, this is a slightly aged up kind of Gravity Falls mystery paranormal comedy sort of show. I liked Gravity Falls. I said yes. And then immediately after asked myself, right, how do I actually score for a TV show? Because while there's a lot of crossover between making music for video games and making music for TV, there are some subtle but significant differences as well. So, now that the pilot episode of Not Normal is available here on YouTube, I wanted to give a little sneak peek and show how I composed the soundtrack for Not Normal. The first step in making the Not Normal soundtrack that I identified right away was that the whole show's musical style needed to be consistent. Now, this sounds pretty obvious, but in the video game industry, that's not always the case. When I was composing music for Club Penguin, it was pretty regular that I would be making a song that was like nothing that had ever been on the site up until that point. There were so many different parties and events and things that it didn't have to match up with one another. It was a patchwork quilt of different experiences, whereas Not Normal needs to be one cohesive soundtrack. So how did I handle that? Well, I decided to start with 2 moments in the pilot episode that seemed to capture the emotional range of the entire show. If I could compose music for those 2 parts, I would have a pretty good idea of how the entire soundtrack should go. The first part that I composed was the setting and character introduction scene. The main character is Miriam, and you first see her when she is visiting Walnut Community College for the first time. Miriam is there because she's interested in taking the school's paranormal investigations course. While she's there, she's introduced to all the other main characters of the show. This includes Casey, who is the only other student of the class and is a major slacker, Kim Hoffman, the teacher of the course, the dean, who is head of the school and is just in general more interested in the money than in actually educating students, and the lovable Jersey Devil, living proof that something paranormal actually is happening in their world. Here's the introduction scene and how I scored it.
Your school has the Jersey Devil?
Oh, is that what that's called? Yeah, he's just kinda in here.
I take it you're not into cryptozoology?
Is that like cryptocurrency?
Not even a little.
Hey, I'm here. Sorry, I'm 40 minutes late. Okay, Casey, open lab today. Have fun. Wait, who the hell are you?
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm a late register. Nice to meet you.
Well, I'm the instructor, Kim Hoffman. Have fun.
Miss Hoffman, is there something I should be working on? Like, were there any assignments in the first week?
Wait,
or...
you enrolled in this class to learn things? Not for the easy pass?
Yes! I moved to Walnut specifically for this night class because I feel...
It's been years since I've had a student who cared. Finally, you're gonna save this program from getting axed.
Kim?
Oh, Dean! Were your ears ringing?
Yes, but that's due to an unrelated and undiagnosed medical condition, and that's Mr. Dean to you.
Like most movies or TV shows, the environment itself can kind of be treated as though it's its own character, which it definitely felt like to me when I was making this. However, I was looking for emotional range, which meant that the second scene for me to score was an action scene. Miriam and Casey have discovered that the school's mascot is acting very strangely, on its own, without any human inside it. And what follows is this action chase scene. With the music from these two scenes in Paranormal, I combined all of the instruments together into a single file in my composing software. That way, I could have a template that I could use as a starting point for any future music that I do for the rest of the episode, which helped immensely. At this point, I found that I was already naturally making some musical decisions for the show. For instance, do I give each main character their own theme that pops up repeatedly throughout the episode? In the case of some characters like the Dean, I decided yes. But for a main character like Miriam, who is on screen frequently, all I did for her was give her a theme that was specific to when she was deep in thought or having an emotional moment or something paranormal is happening from her. What ended up having a stronger theme throughout the episode was actually the school itself. Being a big fan of Monsters University, I really enjoyed how that movie's university had a school anthem, and I wanted Walnut Community College to have one too. That anthem ends up showing up in multiple different ways throughout the episode. But perhaps the most important musical contribution that I added was actually a stinger. Stingers, in musical terms, are not full songs. They're just little musical phrases that kind of show up to punctuate a moment. And in the case of this show, I found that there were a lot of moments where I wanted to just sort of hint to the audience, hey, pay attention, something weird is going on right now. Now, you might get the impression up till this point that I was just making this music on my own and doing whatever I felt like, but that's not true. Kian Carlisle actually did collaborate with me in a bunch of different areas of the soundtrack. For instance, there's a point in the soundtrack in which Casey, the slacker, suddenly realizes that to keep the cushy life that he has, he might actually need to do something. And so he gets a bunch of books about various paranormal things and actually does some studying. Now, in my original soundtrack version of this scene, it was pretty subdued and mysterious. But when I showed this to Kian Carlisle, he said, actually, I had in my mind something that was a lot more powerful, kind of Eye of the Tiger, as though he was really revving himself up for like some important moment. So I went a completely different direction emotionally, and honestly, I think it turned out better. See? Same visuals, different music, completely different mood. That's what my job is in all of this. It's creating the mood so that you can feel the way that you need to feel at the part of the episode where it makes sense. So, you might ask, As a video game composer, what was different, good or bad, about making music for something episodic rather than making music for a video game? For one thing, emotional range. One of the constraining things about making music for a video game is that I, as the composer, don't really know what the player is doing on screen at any one time. So I kind of have to find a feeling that just sort of hits what you generally would feel like in that part of the video game. Whereas here, if there are emotional highs and then 30 seconds later an emotional low, my music can reflect that and I can go all over the place. I can change tempo if I need to, which is an amazing tool that video games don't usually allow me to do. On the flip side, for something like this, time is more of a constraint. But in this case, if I have a character who is somewhat happy and goes to extreme fear in just a few seconds, my music might need to reflect that in that exact amount of time, which means that I'm going to need to find creative solutions to make that work. Another way in which time was a constraint in this project was sometimes there were certain scenes that, after the fact, needed to be re-edited. A crucial scene might be added late in the process, and my beautiful 20-second song might suddenly need to be 25 seconds long. It's kind of like the equivalent of having a sentence that you think is going to end in a period, and then you realize you have one more thought, so you hastily add a comma and then add a little bit at the end. You have to try and make that feel natural musically. All things considered, making music for Paranormal was a blast, and this is a pilot episode, so just like Kian, I'm very much hoping that this show does get picked up somewhere and more episodes can be made, because I was starting to have a lot of fun with these characters and this world and making music that was outside the normally cheery style that something like Club Penguin provided for me. If you're a fan of relatively lighthearted paranormal-style comedies, this show might be right up your alley. The link is in the description of this video if you want to go check it out. Whenever the soundtrack by itself becomes available, I'll also put a link to that in the description of this video so that you can just listen to the soundtrack by itself if you are so curious. Other than that, I hope you found this video somewhat illuminating, interesting. Check out Paranormal, and see you later.